Hello and welcome. I'm Bakery, the support and team captain for Team Dignitas, and today I thought I'd bring you a quick video, just of a rundown of the recent balance update. So jumping right in, the first change that we see is a cleanse change. And the basic idea is the talent's functionality is now, it makes a target unstoppable for 1 second, and it has a 60-second cooldown. So this is similar to how it was before, it's just 1 second less unstoppable time. A lot of people are going to view this as a buff, and in some ways it definitely is, but in a lot of ways it's also a nerf. So the current issue, and why I think we see this buff, is because people are running around with ETC, with Muradin, with Diablo, and they're basically like diving a target, and then Tyrande is following up with a stun, or Kel'Thas is following up with a stun, and that person dies. And obviously it's quite hard to prevent that with the current cleanse. However, it's definitely possible, and especially in pro play, it was very easy to just cleanse as the first stun hits, and the second stun would never hit the target. So in that use case, this is actually a pretty significant nerf, because it's double the cooldown, and that is going to give a lot more opportunities for picks to happen. I really dislike this change. It also removes a lot of the skill around pre-cleansing, and like I say, it's not as effective in pick scenarios, which are the main issue, I feel like. The other thing it does is it also is a huge nerf to Mosh Pit, because now you can just cleanse the target in the Mosh Pit with the stun, and he can interrupt it. Okay, so moving on, we see some buffs to Lunara. So her health's been increased, which is nice. She was definitely too squishy before. And her health regen has been increased, which is, again, nice. And finally, we see her trait has been buffed. Now, this is a pretty nice buff, I think. Having it scale 5% per level and having 2 base increase is the right direction, I think, and it's something I'd like to see a lot more as we move forward. The scaling changes, I think, were good because they accomplished the main goal, which was making 7 to 9 basically equal to 11 to 13 and 17 to 19. So you could fight at all stages of the game, even if you were behind early. But it was bad because it kind of homogenized the game. And changes like this are not only very good buffs, because it now makes Lunara stronger in the late game, but it's also nice to see that kind of diversity coming back into the game. So now we can see some Raynor nerfs, and these are definitely good. I think Raynor's in a good spot. Generally, he's got very clear counterplay, he's got very clear use cases, and these nerfs are just going to help tone him down a little bit and still leave him in a healthy spot. A nerf to Bullseye was definitely warranted as well, because that talent was 100% pick, and it was indeed very strong. Coming on to Brightwing now. Now, no buffs to her healing, no nerfs to her healing. In fact, no changes to anything that wasn't her Q. And they've basically just made her Q useful, which is very nice, but I don't think it's enough. What these changes basically do is they allow for split pushing. So they allow her to clear waves, and they allow her to do it without spending a lot of mana and do it quickly. And that's really what she needed to give her niche back, because right now you can't even justify picking her for that split push, because she just doesn't clear the waves fast enough. Like, someone like Folstad destroys the waves. You are better off sending Leoric, having him insta-clear the wave, and then having him run down. Because it really was quicker and more useful than Brightwing, even though she had that teleport. So yeah, I don't think it's enough to bring her back into competitive play, just because she doesn't really have the targeted healing that's really needed in this meta, but it's a very welcome change. I'd like to see maybe 1 or 2 follow-up changes just to her healing, and we might start to see her again, which would be nice. Now, I think Malfurion, these changes basically help to bring him into a better spot in this meta, definitely. Now, people might pick out the nerf to Tranquility, but honestly, Tranquility usually overhealed what you needed it to. And having the buff on his Q, especially to the initial healing, is going to be very helpful at helping him to survive in these burst-heavy meta games. And I'd have to play with it to see how much it really is, because I'm not so well versed on the numbers since the scaling changes, but I think this will be enough to allow him to be picked over some of the other sustainy healers. Now, we have some quite extensive changes to Tyrande, and overall, I think these changes will kind of leave her in a similar spot, but she won't have such a high win rate, and she will be easier to deal with. So her base damage being decreased is very nice. And what is that's doing is that's making it so it's harder for her to kill someone when it's only her and her setup tank, which is very nice. True shot changes don't really matter because you can't really take that talent anyway. Ranger's Mark, definitely a welcome nerf, but we're seeing a lot of Empower builds now anyway, so I don't think it's huge. I don't think it has a huge impact on her power level. We see a buff to Huntress's Fury, but again, that's not something we normally see, so that's definitely not too big a deal. Her base heal has been increased, but Overflowing Light has been decreased. Now, in general, I describe this as a neutral change because about half the time you would sometimes end up going Sprint instead of Overflowing Light, and having that buff anyway, having that, what is it, like 3% buff maybe? That's like, means that the effective healing on Overflowing Light is still quite similar. So honestly, it's not too big a nerf, but it's not really a buff either. Now the stun duration is a very welcome change. Stun locks were lasting too long, and I'm glad that this one is proportional to its damage. It is a very high damage ability, and it's also a stun. And the Lunar Blaze, I don't think that changes too much, because the reason you would take that is so that you could follow up with stuff like Diablo, with stuff like ETC, and you can still do that when you take this Lunar Blaze talent. So even though it is nerfing the range, and that's nice, to prevent like long range snipes or long range wave clears, it doesn't really change because I still think she can follow up from a safe distance on her stun tank. So Shadowstalk, definitely welcome nerfs. I don't think this changes whether you can pick Starfall or Shadowstalk, but we might see Starfall in the few cases where it will be a good pick. And the cooldown increase is definitely good because it means it's not as spammable. So overall for Tyrande, I think it makes her still a very high priority pick, but it makes her win and do less in those kind of games. And lastly, onto our Stitches change, which is the only warrior to be touched. And it's just a nice quality of life buff, but it doesn't change when he is picked. So when you pick Stitches, you now do more damage, and you become more of a threat in team fights. But you would not be able to pick him as a damage dealer, or in any scenario that you wouldn't have picked him before. So it doesn't really change too much about the game. It just is a nice quality of life buff to him. And we'll see him perform a bit better when he is picked. And so that's it. Overall, it's a decent patch. It's a step in the right direction. And if we can see these every 2 weeks, every 2-3 weeks, then I think this will lead to a much better and much fresher game overall. Thanks for watching. I'd like to give a shout out to my team, my sponsors, and if you enjoyed, you can follow me on Twitter at Bakery Heroes. Thank you very much for watching.
At level 13, I think Relentless is almost required.
How do you interact with your viewers in CSGO?
I usually don't do any viewer games or anything with my viewers.